my name is Natalie McCracken, and I lead marketing here at Pattern Ag. And with me today, I have Dr. Danielle Watts, who is our Vice President of Data Science. And we are going to talk a little bit about the validation and accuracy of our sudden death syndrome test. So with that, we want to start by talking a little bit about once you see the signs of sudden death syndrome, it's probably too late. And that's if you're even seeing sudden death syndrome. So Danielle, talk to us a little bit about like seeing those symptoms and then maybe it's not even what you think you're seeing.
Absolutely. So as a part of the Pattern Ag's Growers Initiative, we oftentimes send scouters to corn and soybean fields to really be able to evaluate the expression rates of different pathogens after our test has been collected. And then we externally validate that with a university laboratory who actually puts the material under a microscope to ensure that what the scouters see is also what they're seeing. And so with that, what we've found is that it is very tricky oftentimes to accurately diagnose sudden death syndrome. Although it has very characteristic sort of expression when it expresses where you have multiple pathogens co-occurring in a plant, it can look like sudden death syndrome, but actually be entirely different organisms. Fusarium root rots, Pythiums, Rhizoctonia, all of these can co-occur in a plant and express, especially at its early expression phases when it's in the leaf and you see spots, it can look a lot like sudden death syndrome, but in fact be multiple other infections. We've actually observed that in growers' fields where professional scouters went out and thought they were observing sudden death syndrome, and then actually in only 22% of the locations where the scouters thought it was sudden death syndrome, was it actually sudden death syndrome. All of that was a part of our validation process and our creating the first ever risk thresholds for sudden death syndrome. There's no equivalent for soil inoculum loads to expression risk anywhere else. And so it's something we're very proud of. As a part of that, we were looking at what is the rate of infection? How do you create a threshold for what's your risk the next season? And so what we did is we created a moderate risk threshold, which really means if you do not treat, if you do not use one of the seed treatments and use a more resistant variety of soybean, you're very likely to see above ground expression. And once you see above ground expression, you are already going to see a yield loss. And then we further created a high risk benchmark. And that is actually where even if you do use one of these treatments, you are likely to see a breakthrough infection in at least part of your field. Because as every grower knows, these treatments where you have really high risk of where sudden death syndrome has really taken hold on that field, even with treatment, you can see breakthrough infections. And so that's something that we really want to make sure our growers are able to make very strong decisions about what's my risk the next season and how do I think about both my rotation, my seed treatments, and the genetic stock I'm using for those seeds.
So if you have you have the SDS test done, you get your results, you have moderate or high risk in your fields, what kind of yield loss are you looking at that point?
Yeah, so, a really severe infection where without treatment, you can see upwards of 60+% of that yield loss. What we more commonly see is that growers are using a seed treatment and they might see anywhere between a 5 and 20% yield loss, depending on how aggressive the sudden death syndrome is in the field and whether or not they planted into a wetter soil. And so definitely there's a link to what are the soil conditions at the point of planting. And how severe is the yield outcome. But certainly we see anywhere between 2 and upwards of 20 bushels per acre difference between low and high risk parts of fields.
The only way to really know whether you're at risk for sudden death syndrome is to have your field tested with our pressure panel. That'll give you corn rootworm, it'll give you sudden death syndrome, it'll give you soybean cyst nematode, and that way at least you're prepared into the next season for what you may face. Thank you so much, Danielle, for talking to us today about the validation of our study. And everyone else, if you'd like more information, please go to www.pattern.ag. Thank you.